Okay, we're now recording. I'll go ahead and share my screen quickly. Screen 2, share. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is just, I wanted to just remind, I'm kind of doing the scene setting, to be honest. I will not be doing the demo itself. So this is just a demonstration of the gear capability as it is right now. Our hopes for today are just to give our customer a sense of where we're at with the tool right now and where we're going. This is not a full demonstration. We have talked about doing a live demo in April. In Stuttgart. So this is just kind of a state of things so you can see how things are going and then also be ready to provide feedback, not necessarily on this call, but in the near future about things you'd like to see. Because there were so many attendees, by the time I saw this list go out, I thought introductions might be a little bit tricky. So I just thought maybe I'd put who's on the call here for right now. And then if we have time, as you ask a question, if you could say who you are, that would be really helpful. So thank you so much to everybody who was able to come today. As you can see, we have our customer from J5 and J4 from AFRICOM. Right now, we're focusing on an AFRICOM demo because we are going to do a EUCOM demo with some of the products from some of the other projects that are funded by EUCOM. So this is really an AFRICOM heavy demo. And then from Army Geospatial Center, you have quite a few people from the team, but the person I'm going to call most attention to right now is Katie Cash because she is the lead tester for gear and she will be doing a big part of the demo. And then from Research Innovations, our contracting office, again, they many of them are our contractor who's working on this. Many of them have come in order to make sure they hear the feedback and are on standby in case anything comes up. But Jamie will be our lead person who will be doing the demo for RII. Just a quick reminder on schedule. So we're doing the demo today. The final code is going to be delivered next week on Monday. And then from there, once the final code is delivered, it gets tested and then it gets onto the live network. Once it's on the live network or also the production network, then you will have access to it as well. As of right now, you do not have access, so you will be seeing demos that are taking place in both AGC's development environment and the contractor's developing environment. We will be scheduling that live conversation in April coming up soon. I think we already put out some dates, and so we just need to follow up with that. And then next steps, kind of in the April-May timeframe, I think is when we talked about discussing extensions and things like that for other aspects of the work. Just a quick agenda for today, and really the big purpose here is because we want to show off that we have a logo, which is pretty exciting. But we have the intro, which is I've already done, and then Katie, as I mentioned, will be talking about the gear user interface and functionality. Jamie will be going through the actual use case demonstration, and then we will have a closing or any kind of follow-up comments that you might have. Before I turn it over to Katie, does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to say before we kick things off? Okay, hearing none, then Katie, I'd like to turn it over to you, please, to begin your part of the demonstration. Thank you.
Everybody, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. I will get Chrome up here. Okay, let me know when that's available.
We can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so welcome everybody. As Heather mentioned, I'm going to be kind of giving you an orientation of the tool, kind of what buttons are where and what everything does. And then Jamie's going to go into a more operational user scenario with some more relevant information. So first things first, we're in our USACE development environment, CAC enabled. We have our standard DoD notice and consent. We are working through the process of all of the IA, RMF control so that when you guys are able to access it, it will be on the production environment here. So let's see. So, okay, so when you first load gear, we have a couple different menus on the left. And then the main thing I want to highlight first, though, is you choose a workspace whenever you're loading in your data. And so a workspace is just a folder structure where a user can build and create their analysis within. You can see we have a lot of workspaces here, and anyone can kind of view other workspaces so that if your colleague is doing some really interesting information, you can see what they have done. And then this is where you also set your AOI. You could do either a global analysis if you have global data, or you could select an AOI based on your interests. So here I have the continent of Africa. And so when I do, a light analysis, it's only going to run the data on the AOI that I've predetermined. Okay. And then one thing that's really nice about the menu here on the left-hand side is everything is collapsible and expandable so that you can kind of focus on the visualization and not necessarily on your menus. So you can kind of turn those on and off as you need. And so the first menu is the workspace that I mentioned. Here you can kind of do your name and description, and you can determine an AOI. If you do not determine an AOI, then you can it's just a global AOI. And then layer catalog, this is where this provides a menu to choose data sources. This is where you're gonna select data for your analysis to visualize and kind of review before you build it into your MCDA. The data here is loaded from the Esri portal that GEAR sits on top of, and in this case, the Red-Eye development environment. When we move to production, it will be in the JECOP, Joint Engineering Common Operating Picture. That has a lot of authoritative data, and the team inputs data. And then we're working on a process. The team is setting up for users to add their own data. So I'm going to go ahead and select the data set just to show. Oh, there it goes. Took a minute to load there. Okay. And so here you can see the global coverage of this data set. However, I then want to maybe look into the data a little more. And then on the right-hand side, we have some menu options, tables, attributes, and you can symbolize based on an attribute in the data. And so I'm going to just pick this overall health attribute score. This is from the ND gain itself. We have not run any analysis on this yet. So again, it's showing you the global coverage, but when we do an analysis, it's only going to run on that AOI. Okay. And then I want to move down next to the scenario menu. The scenario menu is where you're really going to have the meat of your analysis built. You're going to select your layers for the analysis. You're going to choose your function. And just a note on functions. Functions, we have 5 different functions: linear, threshold, unique value, proximity, and count. And when you're building an MCDA, you could take in a lot of different types of data, and a lot of times those data are apples and oranges. And so we need to normalize that data. And so we put it all on the same scale. And so we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. And so the way that we do that is with those functions. And so this is just that process. And there's a couple different ways we can normalize that data based on that function. And then also within the scenario menu, you choose your criteria, your weights, and kind of just everything that you need to do to build out your scenario is in this menu. I'll show here, you can visualize one you've already built. You can edit the scenario, delete it if you no longer need it. And then the cool thing is you can duplicate within your own workspace if you want to change a couple things, but not change your original MCDA. Or you can share that scenario to another workspace and someone else can use it for a different AOI, a different region, maybe a different data set, but tweaking some numbers. So really cool functionality we have built in to easily share those MCDAs that you built. Okay, so I'm gonna just go into one that I have built here. Just to show you the edit scenario. So this is what it looks like. Jamie's gonna go into building this out. I just kind of wanted to show you what it looks like with the criteria added and then the weights added. You can scroll down, you can add a lot of information about what layers you're choosing in your analysis and why you chose that. That can all be done here. And then we have this quick run option, which is really cool. This allows the analyst to kind of play with the data before they kind of do the run for the record. And so that's going to run in the background and it's going to load. And then once it's done loading, you'll see, the analysis was only run on Africa. But I wanted to highlight, we do have a sensitivity analysis that's done that just gives you a little bit more data, about the analysis that was run. So I'm going to collapse this, and you can see this analysis was run, and now it's in my layer, and I can kind of turn it on and off. Okay, so moving on to the jobs menu, Jamie's going to set one up, but this is where you kind of do the run for the record, where then you can export it as a shapefile, or you can export quick runs too, but this is kind of saved within your analysis. If I kind of refreshed, I would lose my initial run, but this is where you kind of do your run for the record, and it's saved within your results. And then you could see here, you could add in, based on your scenario, you could add in your data from your analysis. And so I last ran this a couple weeks ago. So if I add that to the map, it's going to easily display. And I think it's the exact same data that I ran my quick run on, so it looks the exact same. But there you can see that we have everything here for the user to kind of toggle around. You can kind of move it up and down and so on and so forth. I will say, I think, one of the other great features is once I've selected my run, I can view my table attributes, symbology, change how that is visualized. So there you go. It just re-visualized based on the score of that analysis. And so you can change, your visualization a little bit here. And then on this menu as well, we have the export option, where you can export that layer as a CSV, GeoJSON, or a shapefile, and then use that within other tools such as C2IE, where we're doing OPLANs and so on and so forth, or a further analysis in other systems. And then Jamie's going to show you the compare feature, where you can compare multiple layers. We have a swipe function as well. And then finally, we have this cool report feature, which is in progress. We're getting a little bit of a facelift on it, but this is kind of a preview of what it will look like. It creates a really nice PDF printout of your analysis, what you did. It'll include the layers you used and a nice picture that you can download as a PDF. So that's kind of the overall overview of the tool. Are there any questions or anything I didn't go over? Yep, I think Paul has a raised hand.
Yeah, hey, so first of all, thank you for going through the tool. Again, I don't know what we can change or not change, but first of all, like Africa, right? Yes, you got most of the continent, but it's not the AFRICOM AOR, so to speak.
Sure.
So any and all like maps would probably default to the unified command plan that lays out all the different combatant command AORs, because that would be the map that we would want, because specifically here, and maybe it's already in there, I don't know, but like I think Cote d'Ivoire is not part of this map, and we would be interested in that. This looks kind of user defined, and that's cool and all that, but anything to be exported to be officially briefed to the leadership would need to focus on that. Okay.
100%. And yes, this is a user-defined AOI at this point. When we kind of go into production, we'll have those predefined COCOMs selected.
Okay. Second of all, you said it several times, MCDA. What is that?
Sure, I will define it. Multi-criteria decision analysis.
Okay.
But others on, she can maybe go into a little bit more in-depth analysis. That's where adding weights to different layers of information, and then talking about how we can make the tool give us more data about the data, if that makes sense. Heather, are you on? And perhaps her audio cut out. But essentially, scenarios, I'm going to show, we have a lot of criteria here. This is a layer in the infrastructure. Yeah. So we have multi-criteria. And then
can
we're
you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I had it on mute. That was my bad. So
no worries.
My audio is so uneven, it's hard to tell, right? So Muck, to answer your question, MCDA is the core of what this capability does. So what this capability does is it takes multiple data sets that are different from each other and puts them in a space together so that you can do an analysis and come up with your options. So that's just so
Yeah.
MCDA stands for multiple criteria decision analysis. That's the core capability that we are offering through the Gear tool.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Sorry for my silly question. It just, I didn't
No, that's
recognize
not
the
a silly
acronym.
question. I think we're so in the weeds on this right now,
Mhm.
especially lately. Like we've been 24/7 on this. So stuff like
Yeah.
that just seems obvious. But thank you for asking.
Yeah. And from me, my perspective, and I defer to Matt and Garth to chime in as they see fit as well. All of that back end work, there needs to be some kind of decision data analytic standard that then is decided upon to give like the operator, i.e. me, choice of like 3 or 4 options, and that's pretty much it, right? If you expect, or not you, but if we expect the user to go in and tweak all these different things, we will never even know what we'll get on the outside. I mean, I love the capability as a data scientist or a climate scientist to have this functionality to go in and tweak and set up different options. But to go forward into like a workflow, we would definitely need to get some kind of slap the table approved by leadership. This is the decision model. This is the weighted of the factors that we're going to you know, use to analyze for X, right?
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit, Muck. So the first thing I would say is all of the data that comes into this at this point is coming in through Esri, and we have started to develop in partnership actually with some of the CENTCOM funding
Yeah,
a governance standard in terms of like how data comes into our system and what makes it authoritative or not. We consider this especially important because one of your requirements was, what if State Department wants to add something? What if so-and-so wants to add something?
right,
So I bring that up to say that data would then be accessible to those people that are provided the permissions, you know, but
right.
essentially that would be available. And then the other thing I'll just mention that we are not going to show because right now we're dealing primarily with static data
Hmm.
is the functionality has in that jobs thing that Katie was talking about. The functionality is actually pretty neat because what it does is it sets us basically a start time and an interval to be able to say, like, I want this analysis to run monthly, and it will just run, and then you
Right,
can pick it up as the analyst and not or as the person who needs it and just use it.
yeah,
And so once we settle in on something that's meaningful and actually includes static data or dynamic data, that's a really cool functionality that was not in the old gear that the
right.
team the contractor team came up with. And so that actually will also, and it can run, Katie, can you just click on the intervals just one more time? So you can see like it could run once a year. Like I know we talked a little bit with
Yeah,
some of the contingency folks and they said like, you know, I'll probably look at something like this yearly. But then there was like the weather guys were like, we'd look at this every day, you know, so you'd have
yeah,
different
yeah, yeah.
options for how you could run it.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And I really, I think I enjoy the complexity as far as the options, but to be useful in a command workflow, we would definitely need to have to corral, because people would
Yes.
just they would look at this and they wouldn't know what to do. So we would definitely have to identify the product, the workflow, and then build the back end that feeds that export at the right time at the right decision level to hit that decision maker.
Yes,
um,
agree.
Now, also, and again, maybe it's just the again where we are now, the current data and all that, but is the idea that there will be just national or regional level uh, analysis in these countries? Over.
So you'll see from the demo that we can do either. So at this point, like, so what we've done so far is just orient you to the tools so that when we actually show a use case demo, it doesn't feel like what is going on here. We don't even know what this tool is. But Jamie will show you if you have the data for a smaller area, then you can do an analysis for like a province. You could do cities, you could do road networks. Like there's if it's a point, if you can make it as a point, a line, or a polygon, you can
Yeah.
do the analysis on it for the most part. In this case, we just chose, we have previously shown you ND gain for things, and so we're
Right.
just showing that again just for consistency. But you'll be able to see, and maybe Jamie, you can start to pull up your screen as I'm answering the rest of the questions here. But yeah, so and actually, Paul, or getting back to the other thing you noted, so it sounds like you would like to see some sort of a, like almost like a template of your combatant command that you could go to easily every single time. So that's something just to note. I know we could build it as a custom thing, but also, like, I don't know if it's something that someone could select. That we'll keep that as a note for a
Yeah.
requirement.
And
For sure you can do it now, but you could, for sure there's a way for you to do it manually. If there's a way to do it where you can just always go to AFRICOM and click it, we could figure that out maybe either in this iteration or the future.
right. And again, like you said, figure it out is the key. I'm not saying that there needs to be a magical formatted export today or right now. But we would need to sit down with people smart to establish that initial product and then build that into future iteration. You see what I'm saying? Something like a
Yeah.
default where you can just go in as that analyst. Like you said, it could run every week, every month, and you just click and then boom, there's the product. That's, I think, what the average user at a combatant command would need. Now there are individuals that'll probably be more knowledgeable. I'm thinking Garth's super smart up there in the J4, that he wants to be able to tweak and turn the dials, but I'm just concerned with the complexity hitting the average staff officer and overwhelming them. Over.
Yeah, so one of the things that we mentioned, and hopefully, if it's okay, we might hold the rest of the questions to the end just so we get the full
Yeah,
use
I'm
case
sorry.
demo.
And we
No,
do
no, it's
actually
good.
have a hard 1600 that we got to stop at. Over.
Okay, so then we should, so I'll just I'll pass it over to Jamie if that's okay, and then we can follow up with the other pieces of that. But we do have some hopes to improve user friendliness. It's right now it's friendly for an analyst, but maybe not somebody who really is just going to use the info. And so that's something that we're working on as well, and a note that we heard, because we understand the key things here are that it's user friendly and maintainable. And so Gear is a complex tool, so it's going to take a little while to figure out what user friendly looks like, but we'll take notes on these things and try and figure out how to incorporate them either in this iteration or in the future.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, and Garth, I did see that you had a hand raised, but is it okay if we move forward with this part and then cover questions at the end? Let's assume yes, for now. Jamie, if you would not mind starting your part of the demo, that would be great.
Sure. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is RI's internal development version, but when you log in, you also see the agreement. So we just accept that. So we're going to be building a workspace with scenarios that focus on undernourishment rates, population projection, and yearly temperature change in Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. And so we all know groups, like Al-Shabaab are active in this region, and they typically are very opportunistic with the exploiting lack of resources and environment issues to be able to recruit and gain control of the state. So that's gonna be our focus. So to create a workspace, again, you're gonna go up to this little triangle and we're gonna click Create New. And then we will name this one Horn of Africa Scenario. And you'll notice that the required fields have a red asterisk in the system. So it kind of helps make sure that you're putting in all the required information before moving along. And this is the case for both workspaces and scenarios. And then, so for area of interest, again, if you didn't have an area of interest, this would run globally, or you could create your own. There's already one in the system that I'm going to look for real quickly. So we're going to look for the Horn of Africa AOI. That was from 2024. So we've got our workspace, it's created. So now we've got to just add it. So that same area we go to, view all, and then you'll see the newest ones up at the top. If you were going to look for one that you had done before, you could just type into the search bar and look for that title. So once we've highlighted that, we'll just click close. And then we see we've got the name of our scenario and we've got the AOI that we're looking for. And then we're going to be creating a new scenario. So you've got some options. You can zoom in to this area. So these are the 4 countries that we're going to be focused on. So we're going to click scenario over here to the left, and then we're going to click create new scenario. And again, we've got to name this. And so since we're going to be focusing on the Horn of Africa, nourishment, population, and temperature, just going to give it a nice simple name. And then for the alternatives layer, this is the base layer for alternatives to compare. So for the first analysis that we're going to run, we're going to base this on each country's boundaries. So we can compare Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. So in that alternatives, we're going to be looking for the country polygon. Then again, we filled out the requirements. You can put in an optional description. You can change the classification. And once you've got that all set up, you just hit save. And now we've got that sitting in our scenario area. And then to build it, you would just click the pencil to open it up. We can add a description. I'm just going to do that quickly. We've got all our alternative base layer, and then we're going to start building this. So first, we're going to click Add Objective. And we're just going to simply name this Horn of Africa scenario. Again, you've got an optional description. And then we can click Save. And then we're going to start adding the data layers. So we add them by clicking Add Criteria. And we're going to start with nourishment. Just going to fill that in. And then it just kind of lets you move along. So we've got that filled in. We'll click Next. And then these were the functions that Katie was talking about. So if you go, you've got a couple different options. For this one, we're just going to leave it at linear. And we're using this function because we're going to be examining minimum and maximum scores between these different data sets. And this is going to normalize the data on a 0 to 1 scale. And so we're going to have an apples to apples comparison that was mentioned before. And then to add your data source, you've got 2 options. You can either add it from the map or from the server. We haven't added anything to our map yet, so we're going to be searching for our layers in the server. So first, we're going to start with our food insecurity. And these are data sets that I had put together and put into the system, but they're available for anybody to use. So as people are gathering data and putting it in, it can be utilized by different teams. So we've got our layer selected, and now we'll be selecting our attribute. This is the only one that's in this particular database, so it's really easy. It's just the prevalence of undernourishment. And then if you scroll down, you can see your min and max, and you have the option to flip them depending on your analysis. And then you also can see the different statistics that it provides, and that might help you determine the type of analysis you're looking for. So we're just going to leave everything as it is and click Next. And now that everything is finalized, we're just going to click Create and Close. So we've got that first one in there, and we're just going to do that another 2 times to put in the 2 other data sets. So we'll just click Add Criteria again. This one is going to be population projection, so we're going to name that. And again, we're going to leave this as linear. We're going to search in the server for our particular data set. We're going to select it. This one does have a few. We are looking for the total population. And then once that populates real quick, there we go. And again, we're just going to leave everything as it is and just click Next, and then Create and Close. So we've got that second one in there. And then for the last one, we'll just hit Add Criteria one more time. We're going to name this one Temperature Change. Click Next. Again, leave it as linear. search for a data set on the server. Now let's take a second to populate. And then next, and then create and close. So now we have the 3 different data sets that we want for this scenario, and we've got to weigh them. So we'll start with this overall objective of just clicking these 3 dots and just moving this all the way over to 1. And now, since we have multiple criteria, we're going to weigh each one of those. If you only had 1 data set, the objective would be 1 and the criteria would be 1, but we've got 3 of them, so we're going to weigh them against each other. And so one nice function is you can click this link right here and it will link them all together. So for this particular scenario, we want undernourishment to be 0.4. We want population projection and temperature change to both be 0.3. So since they're linked, the system will help you so you don't have to sit there and do the math. So I'm just going to shift this over to where I want it to 0.4, and it automatically will update these 2 and everything will equal to that top 1. So it was determined through research that undernourishment should be weighed slightly higher than population projections and temperature change. And while they're all important, undernourishment is a very now problem facing this area, and something that nefarious groups can exploit to try to gain favor with local communities. And so to help different users see that, we can go in and just add a description. So if somebody else was going to come in and see this, I might want them to know why I weighed that more. So if I click these 3 dots and edit, just wait for it to populate, I can just add a description and leave everything the same. And now we've got that updated. So as you're building this, you can adjust your weights, you can add descriptions, you can kind of keep changing things around pretty easily to get it to where you want it to be. And now we're going to click this quick run. And like Katie had said before, this quick run option allows users to see what the results would look like. And it's a really good tool if you want to go in and make those adjustments to your scenario while you're building it. So then you can see what it looks like, make your adjustments without having to have a permanent run. With that though, these quick run results will not be saved. So once you log out, they'll be gone. But it's nice to just kind of see the results quickly on the map. So we've got that populated, everything looks good. So now I would want to create some permanent results. So I'll just go down here to jobs and then add new job. And we're going to call this Horn of Africa scenario admin 1, just because we're doing this against the country boundaries. And then we'll do another one against the state boundaries. So I just want to be able to delineate between the 2. We're going to look for that scenario that we just built. And then again, you can pick the start time and the start date. I'm just going to do this from 1 minute from now. And then again, the different intervals, but this is static data. So we're just going to leave it as do not repeat. Clock just went up. And then once you've got everything filled out, you just click create. And then you'll see the job in progress sitting on the jobs tab. And then once it's done, it'll be cleared from the jobs tab. And so while this goes, just to go over kind of why these data sets were chosen for this specific scenario is just to kind of better understand the correlation between these data sets and the local terrorist organizations that take advantage of socioeconomic, humanitarian, and environmental issues to recruit and enhance community sentiment. There's a growing food crisis in the area, and Al-Shabaab commonly will provide resources to further legitimize their intervention, undermining state actions and increasing local grievances. And also the temperature is another issue that East Africa is facing, with predicted increase anywhere from 1.3 to 2.1 Celsius by 2050. And these temperature rises suggest that it'll be harder to predict weather events, which in turn could affect things like drought preparation. And then increased populations will put further strain on resources within Somalia and surrounding countries. And then access to services is higher in urban areas, while rural populations have greater extreme poverty. And again, it puts those rural populations at a disadvantage, and possibly coerced by groups like Al-Shabaab. And so now that the job has disappeared, we can go down one more to results. And then you'll see the scenario is sitting there. And then if you click the little triangle, you can see the results that were just finished. If you want to add them to your map, you simply click the plus, and then it's in the map. So you can collapse this panel over to the left. This was our quick run, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And now we've got our results. And we can go in and adjust the symbology. So I've got this highlighted. Over to the right, I'm going to click symbology and adjust the color ramp to a green to red. And we want this green to red because for this specific one, we're looking at socioeconomic, humanitarian, and environmental issues. So the higher the score, the worse the area is affected. And so therefore, we want to keep this green to red. So red means worse. And so when you're comparing these data sets across these 4 countries, we can see that Ethiopia and Somalia are the same, and then Djibouti is a bit worse, and then Kenya is the worst. So it kind of gives an idea of what's going on as far as those 3 aspects with those 4 countries. And then if we want, we can go ahead and dive in and get a little bit more granular look. So if we go back to scenario, I want to keep this, I just want to adjust it, and instead of running it on the countries, I want to run it at the state level. So as Katie said, you've got a couple different options. I'm going to go to these 3 dots and just click duplicate. So then that way I don't have to rebuild anything. And you can change the name right here. So I'm going to just click the little pencil and just add admin 1 just to differentiate between the 2, and then just save and close. And now we've got the second one that's popped up, and we're going to go in and just make a quick little adjustment. So again, back to the pencil. And we want the same scenario, we want the same layers, we want the same weighting. We just want this, the base layer to change. So we'll just, next to it, click the pencil. And then we're gonna look for an admin 1 layer or a state and providence layer. So we'll click that. As you can see, it says that the scenario has been updated. So then we'll just click the checkbox and everything has been updated. And now we can rerun this. So we'll just create a job and create a permanent record for this. So again, we'll just go to the left and click jobs, and the same process as before. We'll do a new job. We'll call this one Horn of Africa Scenario Admin 1, and we'll look for this new scenario that we just adjusted. And again, you can adjust the date and the time. Again, this is static data, so I'm just going to leave it as does not repeat and just have it go 1 minute from now. Actually, I need to close this real quick. And then I will be able to do this. My apologies. Okay, and then that's created, and that'll be sitting there until it finishes, and then it'll leave and go to the results. And so being able to quickly run the same scenario against different base levels, in this instance, country level versus state level, will give far more detailed picture and allow for search area reduction. This is great if resources and assistance need to be focused on the most affected areas. For example, being able to see the difference amongst Somalia malnutrition rates is extremely important, as they're commonly among the highest in the world. The number of children receiving treatment for malnutrition rose 300% the first 6 months of 2022, and a growing youth population facing constant socioeconomic issues is important because Al-Shabaab heavily recruits from these youth populations, and the vast majority joining between 15 and 24. And studies on Al-Shabaab radicalization have shown that the #1 reason for joining the group is for economic reasons. And so now we can see that that job is complete, and we'll see it populate in our results tab. So again, we can just click the little triangle and we'll see that results. We can add it to the map. Let's just be taking a second. There we go. And then I'll collapse this panel. And then we see both of them. So we've got the country one, and then we've got this admin one. And I'm going to set it to the same color ramp as the other one, so that way we could compare. So I have it highlighted. I'll click symbology, and now we've got this the same green to red. And we can see a much more detailed pattern here. And we've got some hot spots that are able to be visualized when you're looking at a smaller area. So up here in the north, this is an area where we know ISIS Somalia is active. And then down here in southern Somalia is the area where Al-Shabaab is heavily concentrated. And if we close this, we can also compare the two. So if we go over just under symbology and click compare, now it says we've got one layer selected, now select the second one. So now we've got these two, and we've got this slide bar. So this is the exact same scenario, just run at 2 different levels, and you can move it and be able to kind of visualize the difference. And then to get out of that compare, we would just hit reset. And again, you can export a couple different versions. So are there any questions on the gear demo? I do have, I'll show you an example of utilizing it in another tool, but I just wanted to see if there's any questions quickly.
Actually, Jamie, I'm going to ask that you, since they have a hard stop in 15 minutes, I'd like to ask that you move forward with showing the possible ways to integrate with C2IE. I think that'll be of interest.
Absolutely. So here's just a quick example of utilizing gear output with other tools for different briefings and knowledge sharing. The current way to utilize the outputs in C2IE is through screenshots and the text editor function. And an example of a workspace like this could then include additional pages, more command-specific details to provide enhanced understanding and analysis, dealing with operations, KLEs, and SIGACs. Just a couple examples. So here's a gear output in the same area, but this one was focused on undernourishment, water insecurity, and yearly temperature change. And then 2 of the same areas were also highlighted. And then the text boxes, we can give the user some context. And then with gear exports, you can upload those into C2IE. So we've got the screenshot, we've got some details, but then down here, we have a CSV. That's this exact output that you can easily download. And then we also have a shapefile that you could also download and bring it into, Google Earth or ArcMap. And then just some examples of other scenarios that can be used. This one is just focused on Somalia, so just kind of comparing state by state. Again, getting that screenshot, being able to put this into C2IE. This is a quick look at running a scenario on just one layer. So this one's just looking at drought-affected populations in Somalia. So you can kind of get an idea of the most affected areas. And then also in gear, you can layer different items on top of each other. So this is the same scenario that we set up, the undernourishment, population projection, and yearly temperature change. And then on top of it, I was able to put 2022 and 2023 violent extremist organization attacks. So you can kind of see where the attacks are happening amongst where these populations are dealing with these issues. And then you could have the option, as an example of if these things are being tracked in C2IE, I just placed one of them into the system quickly just to show that you could see it over here, and then if you wanted more detail, you could have a list of these incidents and then get further detail into the system. So that's all I have for C2IE.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Jamie. So if you could just go back to the gear screen just for the rest of this. And so we have about 14 minutes left for any questions that you might have. I will start with Garth's question related to the tool itself and potentially any kind of integration that you might have seen from C2IE.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Because my connection's really been bad today.
Yeah, you're on, Garth.
Okay, good. First question, at the very beginning, you mentioned that the platform now resides on Redeye. And is that just for the development side of it, or is that where do we intend to have it actually sit when it's delivered?
It
Because
will
that makes a
sit on
difference.
the
Who has?
JECOP. It'll sit on the
It'll still.
JECOP. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Which
Yeah,
is
so
it's still part of Red Eye, correct?
yeah, it's still part of Red Eye, but it's a part
Yeah.
that you got, like, so basically the same place where you would go to get engineering information, you would be able to go
Right.
again. In addition to that, we haven't, we're still working out the process of it, but so that will be the instance that's CAC enabled. And then we'll also have a user password version of it that people can access. And so the specifics on that are yet to be determined, but that
Okay.
will be the way that non-CAC users who are sponsored can access the system.
Okay. Yeah, because we're working on other links between Red Eye and the JECOP to our C2IE, and everyone's got their own version of a COP, so we want to make sure that different systems can inform one another. So
yeah, I agree. And one of the things we've been trying to do is figure out if there's data that needs to reside in the JECOP or something like that in order to kind of create that continuity, then we want to know that and be able to provide that for you guys as well.
Yep. And my second question is I think we touched on it earlier, but as far as bringing in data, there has to be some kind of system to look at the data quality and the format so it's compatible with the overall data set. So I think you mentioned something earlier and I might have missed it. Over.
Yeah, sure. Well, this is an important one, so it's good to circle back to. So this project is, as you may know, is part of kind of a family of projects. And so part of this family of projects is the kind of common operating picture that we are building. And really the purpose of that is more like for data and collaboration and storage and things like that. As a part of that system, we have a process that we're starting to develop where you can fill out a form and to evaluate the data and help us build the metadata and figure out if it's one that makes sense to be in the system and for how long and things like that, or is it something that needs to be an API call, those kind of things. And so that was something that we identified almost immediately after kind of the first year of working with UCOM and AFRICOM on stuff, is that this is going to get overly complicated with the data quickly. And so when CENTCOM joined the effort, we are using that money to kind of create that data structure using DoD data governance standards. And so it won't be something that's different from what we're supposed to be doing. It'll just be organized so that there's a tagging system so that you can identify the data. We can figure out at least initial recommendations on permissions for who sees what data, that sort of thing. And then also whether or not it's deemed authoritative, which is kind of a moving target, right? But at least you'll be able to see who's using it and is it a well-respected data set, or is it something somebody generated on their own, which may also be valuable, but it's important for you to know that. So we are kind of working through those pieces of a process this year with the CENTCOM funding.
Okay. And sorry, I have a third question too. Sorry to everybody.
No, it's okay. Ask as many
with
as
the
you
with the
can.
criteria, as we do our analysis and we load various criteria, I've seen a lot of geospatial systems that allow you to weight your criteria with like a sliding bar sort of system or numerical. Is that an intended capability here so that, that's a certain criteria is more important than, the next criteria and so on? Over.
Yeah, Jamie, can you pull up that part in the scenario? So Garth, you'll see here where it says Horn of Africa scenario, and then where it says undernourishment, population change, and temperature change, right there where she pulled up, there's that, if you push on those three dots, that's a sliding bar.
Oh, okay.
That you can use.
Yeah. Okay, I see. That's good, because that's always been an important feature of most geospatial systems.
Yeah, so you have that, and then you can link them or unlink them. And so you see that kind of broken link picture there. And then if you click it, it becomes linked so that if you change one, they all still equal one at the end.
Okay, great. Hey, thank you.
Sure. Okay, we have about 8 minutes left. What? Yes, Muck.
So And again, I don't know the answer to this, but it just seems to me that any specific data source, for example, food insecurity, underlying that data source is input, and some of that may be other data sources. So, is there a way not to double count things? Again, I don't know if this is back to like you're talking about apples to apples comparison, but like we don't want to double count temperature if we're including temperature in food and temperature separately, right? I don't, I guess I'm not sure if that's a real thing or not. I'm probably just exposing my ignorance. Over.
No, that's a real challenge that you run into because especially sometimes these indices are built using other indices and indices take all of that information and put it together and then you don't necessarily see it. It's a little bit black box, so you don't know. So in this case, I would say that's something that we could take note as a future thing would be, is there a way that we could flag you're already counting this data set? I think it would be hard, to be honest with you, Muck. Like, I'm not sure
Yeah.
exactly. What we're trying to do is figure out what metadata to bring over about the data so that you can see where these things are coming from. Because, for example, like what I think you're saying is like, what if one of my layers was ND gain and then one of my layers was food, but food came from ND gain. So now I'm counting
Right.
food twice. Yeah,
Right.
so that is a legitimate problem that analysts have with this kind of thing. And it's easy to double count because of the way data is structured. So I think I'm gonna call it a hard problem that like in terms of how to make the technology do it, but that could be my technology ignorance. So maybe
Well,
it's
and maybe
something
it's
where we could
just,
ask people to put their heads together on it.
yeah, and maybe it's just transparency of the data, right? Like you were saying, you're trying to figure out what metadata to bring over with the actual ND gain, right? It's like,
Yeah.
what is all those sub information to explain where that data comes from, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I think that's good just to be transparent, so everyone knows as the analyst can go in there and move the knobs. They know what knobs are moving, and or at least potentially could have that information. Over.
That's the hope. And in the future iteration of this, we would also like if users have, so for example, if you show this to a country representative and they say like, well, your nutrition data isn't very good, our nutrition data is better. We would like in the future kind of an easy option to be able to take in that data if you wanted to and see if it changed the analysis. Right now you'd go through the governance process, but we do want
Yeah.
kind of the ability to do like some of those one-off kind of thinking things that happen on your own machine. But it's not going to be able to do that in this iteration. But that is
Yeah.
also another way to sort of look at some of that stuff, is that if you can put your hands on the base data and play with it that way, that can help in some cases. But I do think it's on our radar. I don't know how to
Yeah.
fix it, but we are trying transparency as a first step.
Yeah. No, and you bring up a good secondary issue. It's like, okay, Tanzania has better data, and they want to use their data in this tool. That's awesome. They don't want Kenya to have that data. So how do you keep those data sources separate?
Yeah, I think it's something that we're working through. The governance piece is a hard piece, but it's something, and I think it's going to require more than, just kind of the initial funding that we have from CENTCOM, to be honest. But I think what we're trying to do is figure out how do we set up those groups so that people feel comfortable sharing info, but not oversharing info. And
Yeah.
then, and if it is, and because you'll have, like I said, you've got right now, you've got our existing structure on how we want to organize it. And you do have the option to say in there that you don't want other people to, like you want to be, keep this data fairly exclusive to you as a user, like, so you have some options to be able to do that. But that, it's like any system really. I think, at least in my opinion, the governance problem is tricky, right? So that'll be something that we have to work through over time, but it's on our radar. as a prominent issue that needs to be resolved. And it may even be something where there's a future version of this that's disconnected or that is standalone, that someone could just do their own thing on their own computer and it's not networked, you know, and then they just show the
Yeah.
results at the end.
Yeah.
That might be an option as well.
Okay. Well, Matt said he dropped off. He's going to log into the other meeting. We can continue on for another couple minutes as we need, but then I'll need to go over as well. Garth, you feel free to stay as long as you want.
So I don't think we have anything else. I'll just open it up to first government team and then contractor team. If there's anything in particular you want to add before the AFRICOM team hops off. Government team, anything?
I guess I had one other question. It sounds like that, you know, the ultimate use of this tool, there's going to have to be a requirement for some kind of continued support to make it work. I know that just like any other system that gets delivered, there has to be some kind of service after the sale. So that's something that we're going to have to think through once this gets delivered, because I'm sure that we'll need plenty of help at some point. Over.
Sure. And so one thing that that Muck has been involved in is we have some funding to do training and teaching and identifying use cases and things like that that we're going to talk through now that we're starting to actually have a tool that we can demonstrate. So that's one place we can start to do it. And then in terms of maintenance, one of the reasons it's in the JECOP is because we get to take advantage then of some of the other systems that are in there. And so there's still a maintenance cost and there's still a cost to be able to get some of that assistance, but it's significantly lower because it's shared across multiple systems, which is something we try to do in order to help with that ease of maintenance piece. Did I lose audio again?
No, you're still there. Thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm so paranoid about it now. Okay, but yeah, so okay. Does anybody else have any questions before we hop off?
You know, Heather, this is Ashley. I would also like to mention, you know, back to Garth's comment that this is built as much as possible in COTS, so that we are trying to lessen the maintenance burden in the future as well.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so we're right at 10. So this was recorded, so we'll send out the link to the recording in case there's somebody who wasn't on the call who wants to hear it. And then we'll be doing additional demos with the other commands and also scheduling the live trip to Stuttgart. But for now, just really proud of the opportunity to share with you where we're at with this. So thank you for making the time. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who was on the call to support the demonstration from both government and contracting teams. Thank you. I'll stay on the line for an extra minute or so in case anybody has anything.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Garth.
Hey, Heather, this is Dewey. I joined in late.
Hey, Dewey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Nice to hear from you.
You too. I caught some of your stuff. It looks really good. Can you also add me to the distro on the recorded? I could pass on to some of the guys here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem at all.
Thanks a lot. Have
Sure.
fun in Stuttgart.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks, Heather. I'm signing off.
Okay, that sounds good. And I'll follow up with you, Muck, to see if you, oh, just kidding.
That was fast.
Yeah.
Right, take care.
Okay,
Bye.
bye everybody.
Thanks, everyone.